All right, I want to welcome everybody back. It is time for our next panel, the session three or the fourth panel of the day, if you count the opening astronaut panel. We're here for the space careers panel. I'm really excited about this one. It's a very different spin on the topics we've been discussing so far. So we've for Madison and Ashley, we've heard from a panel of astronauts this morning. We heard from a panel of space scientists. We just had a large panel of space educators, and now we're here to talk with the both of you about space careers. And you both have very interesting, very different space careers. So, Madison is the CEO of Space Copy, which I'm excited to learn more about as a space infrastructure company. And Ashley Zelinskie then is a conceptual artist that does space-related work. So, we one of the themes of this day is that whatever your strengths and passions are, there's a place for you in the growing space economy and humanity's future in space. I think this particular panel is a fun way to illustrate that and dive into that in a little more deeply. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen. I have, for the recording purposes, pinned Ron and myself and Ashley and Madison here. So that is what we will see on the recording. But definitely counting on all of the participants to pipe in and share their questions as well. But Ashley and Madison, my first question for you two is one I love to ask in this context. It's sort of a space metaphor, but what is the trajectory that has brought you here, that has brought you to a career in the broader space economy, if you will, and it has brought you to a space education event this Friday midday, probably Friday afternoon for both of you, I think. So it's an opportunity to share a little bit of your story and to share a little bit about your current work and what you do that's related to space, and then we will open it up to questions from Ron and from the participants, and take the discussion from there. But on my screen, I've got Ashley and then Madison. So Ashley, if you want to kick us off, what's your trajectory? Oh, the participants have heard this before, but if there's anyone who may have offered you a gravity assist along the way, that may have changed
Oh.
the course of your life, mentors, teachers, whoever, somebody's grandson in an earlier session was their gravity assist. So happy to hear about that too. But Ashley, take it away.
Yes, I've had many gravity assists actually. Coming from a background of fine art, you need many gravity assists in order to end up in astronomy and astrophysics and working with in the space industry. So it's funny you say that. I'm actually in Spain right now, so it's 8:30 for
Oh,
me.
wow. Thank you
So
for
I'm
still joining us.
Oh no, I wouldn't be anywhere else. I'm actually here in Spain doing an art fair where I'm presenting spectroscopy data from the James Webb Space Telescope to the arts community at a very traditional film festival. But they have allowed me to present my generative algorithmic art based on the spectroscopy data in this very like formal traditional film setting. So it's really, really cool. And I'm really happy to be here and be able to share with a completely different audience that would maybe never, um, be interested in the Webb telescope, especially spectroscopy of all things. Um, so I guess I can start out with my gravity assists. How do you end up going to art school and majoring in sculpture and art history, and then working with the Webb Telescope team? And several things have to go a certain way to get there. I was a resident artist at New Inc., which is a tech and arts incubator at the New Museum, and I applied to be part of this program. In the first year, I was the first year that they were doing this. And one of my advisors in this program was Kathleen Ford, and she was also an advisor on the SETI Artist in Residence program. And so part of the reason I was so excited about doing this residence program was because I knew that I would maybe have like a foothold into doing the SETI Artist in Residence program. And I did. I applied and I went out to Hat Creek Radio Observatory in 2016 and spent my summer in Northern California with Jill Tarter and a bunch of the scientists and engineers at SETI. And after spending an evening laying in a radio telescope array field and looking up at the Milky Way for the first time, As a city girl, I had never seen the Milky Way. So I was seeing the stars and the satellites and the ISS pinging by for the first time, with a bunch of scientists and engineers around me that knew exactly what they were talking about and pointed everything out. And it was just such a life-changing experience for me being able to be there with those people. Um, and then we did a tour of NASA Ames. We visited NASA Ames and got to see what projects and research they were doing at NASA Ames. And then it was there that the people at NASA told me that I could apply to go see a rocket launch at Kennedy. Um, so I saw the OSIRIS-REx mission launch later that year. So my first rocket launch, was blown away. Had an amazing experience getting to feel the vibrations of sending something to space and what that does to you, physically and mentally as a person when you're able to see something like that. And coming from an artist perspective, I never thought I'd be sitting at NASA Kennedy watching a rocket launch from like with the scientists and engineers on the team, like so close. And it was there that I was tipped off to this really cool telescope that was being built at the time at NASA Goddard, which was the James Webb Space Telescope. And I applied, to actually an artistic outreach program that was being run by Maggie Massetti, at NASA Goddard at the time. She's still there, doing social media and public outreach for the Webb Telescope. She does an amazing job, at reaching out to people that would otherwise maybe not be so interested in the telescope in different communities and different, she's reaching out to artists, she's reaching out to musicians. So that's another gravity assist was Maggie. Um, and yeah, so I saw the Webb telescope while it was in the clean room at NASA Goddard in 2016. I got to stand in front of it and see my reflection in a telescope that would later be reflecting the light from the first stars and galaxies being formed. That was a pivotal moment in my artistic career. I spent the day with Dr. Amber Strawn and Dr. John Mather and got to learn more about the telescope and actually 3D scanned their arms, reaching and made a sculpture of them reaching through the telescope to the stars. Um, and it sat dusty in my studio for many, many years until the telescope finally launched and we got the first images back. And then it was like the images, seen around the world, where I had so many friends. I was actually at NASA Goddard during first images, and I got so many texts from friends and family and people all over the world saying, "Oh, is this what you've been talking about for so many years?" And so it's like, yeah, I started with the team at NASA Goddard in 2016. And it wasn't until 2021 that it launched, and then 2022 when we got these amazing images back. So I kind of sat on what I was cooking up for many years, before I actually got to, experience it and watch other people experience it in real time. So yeah, that's basically my background. I do a bunch of different types of art. I do 3D printed sculpture. I do marble. I do generative artworks, digital artworks, virtual reality experiences, and all partnered with some type of scientific research being done and a subject matter expert that I will partner with for each work of art. And I've been doing that for, yeah, well, with the web team since 2016. So it's been a crazy ride.
So I'm in suspense. What happened to the sculpture?
Yeah, so I showed the sculpture in 2022 at a gallery in New York City. And now it's part of the Onassis Foundation permanent collection, and it lives in Athens, Greece.
Awesome.
Um, yeah, I was really sad actually when it sold because I packed it up and I cried because it had lived with me for so long and had so much meaning. And Amber and John have become really, really close friends of mine. So it felt like a little bit of us was all going away when it sold. But I'm glad it's part of a really nice, foundation collection. So it's actually on view and I can go see it whenever I want. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's awesome. How cool to have such a connection with something that's available to the public now. I love it.
Mhm, mhm.
Well, thank you
Share a
for taking.
picture.
Yeah. What's that, Ron?
Share a picture if you could.
Oh
Oh,
yeah,
I can. Yeah, yeah. I
that
can
would
do
be
that.
awesome.
I can post it in the chat. Mhm.
And yeah, thank you for starting us off there. It's such a fantastic way to kick off this panel. And Madison, I'm excited to hear as well your trajectory and anyone who may have given you a gravity assist along the way.
Thanks, Mark. And gosh, if I was to sit there and try and name off all the people that helped me figure out how to have a career in space, I think we'd be here for twice as long as this panel. Um, I'll keep it as succinct as possible. Everybody, please check out that link from Ashley now. I'm excited for it. I'm going to click on it as soon as I'm done here. Um, I thought it was really interesting because I also started my career in fine arts before I transitioned to STEM. So I was running a jewelry business. I'm actually wearing some of my pieces today, um, and did a variety of different things. There was painting, there was glass-based art and things like that. And I was very, very young at the time. And I had a big, big passion for space sciences. And when I say young, I'm talking I was 14 years old. I was very young, but I was not classically trained. I had a big passion for what I did and had tried to turn that to a business. It was going great. But there was always this kind of itch in the background. And I got into 3D modeling and digital art and design. And I had created a project, and I was still in school at the time. I created a project around what it would be like to live on Mars, what, for lack of a better term, colonization would look like in that aspect, and what kind of technologies would the space agency have to employ in order to be able to make it happen for long duration missions. And I got into the world of 3D printing around that same time, just trying to research that as a technology and trying to put the A back into STEAM instead of just STEM, and created this entire digital concept of what it would look like. And it got turned into a mini documentary that ended up getting sent through to two places. It got sent to NASA through their NSPIRES, or the NASA Solicitation and Proposal Integrated Review and Evaluation System, which is where they intake all of the new ideas that get funding. And then it went through the Science Art Exchange that was being run by NASA Johnson's Jancy McPhee at the time. She is amazing. She highly encouraged me to go for it as far as pursuing a career in STEM. Even though I didn't have any traditional knowledge, I hadn't taken any prerequisite courses or anything like that that surrounded what I ended up working in, which was planetary science and astrophysics. But she just kept encouraging me to keep going, keep applying, keep trying. So I bugged the guys at NASA for a really, really long time. And eventually, back in 2019, I ended up getting a part-time position for working in their space research education system, which is helping to down select the new technologies, mainly satellite bus designs and a few sensors and camera systems that were going to fly in orbit, especially things that were kind of crossing the cislunar border. And that was all being managed by university-based teams. So I was still working with early career professionals as a young person that's trying to get involved in STEM. So I had a really good footing when I kicked off. I didn't know very much about space sciences other than kind of the classic things about how solar system works, some of the common kind of trajectory means of getting to the lunar surface and what a variable star is, and just kind of like the really foundational basics. But I worked for the NASA administration for about 6 years. And I was what they considered to be their everything person. I was bounced back and forth between different divisions. A lot of it was remote-based work. A lot of it was going on during COVID. So I had the privilege of working for Goddard for a few months and then working for Kennedy for a few months and then JPL. And I managed to circulate my way through about 5 NASA centers during my tenure. And at some point, they put me in for heliophysics. And I didn't know very much about the study of the sun other than what Parker Solar Probe was. And I saw all these new technologies being proposed and started to dig deeper into what is the intrinsic merit of them. How do you judge if a piece of spacecraft or a piece of equipment that's going to launch is having the capability and the lifespan and the overall value not only to a place like NASA, but overarchingly to the researchers that are creating it and to the STEM community, does this matter? And a lot of my work went on to be part of publications, which has now spanned a whole private career in research for myself. I was working at NASA in the early days of the Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope development, and I ended up having to trek down to Goddard to go and accept an industry award just when they were putting the gold foiling on kind of the core system. So it was really cool to actually spend several months helping to down select what, for example, the pressure sensors and high speed cameras, what was going to be on that telescope, and then go down there and actually see it in the clean room being built. So I was really, really privileged. Douglas Rickman from NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center was definitely one of my early career mentors. He was what we all refer to as the grandfather of lunar regolith. He created a lot of the foundational simulants that lunar infrastructure technologies use to this day, including us. Um, and so many other people that were just sprinkled across partly industry, but a lot of government. Got involved with the NASA Lunar Surface Innovation Consortium and got to know all the folks at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab. And it was a really tight-knit community that was really open and welcome to being part of the circle and getting more knowledge and getting trained. So I took that, I tried to apply it to entrepreneurship, and about 3.5 years ago, I started Space Copy. Um, Very, very short explanation is we're a space-based manufacturing company. We operate out of Canada and the United States, and we take any kind of local materials, scrap metal, recycled plastic, soil sand, and lunar regolith, and we turn it into infrastructure, anything from vehicle repair parts to habitats to rocket launch pads. And we do this not just in space, but also in areas on Earth that have been affected by natural disaster zones or mining, or in Canada, remote Indigenous communities where infrastructure development is limited. So, if I was to kind of summarize my background, it is non-traditional in art and business, went into STEM, got a whole bunch of experience from really inspiring folks that knew exactly what they were talking about, until I knew what I was talking about, and then recycled that back into a career in space infrastructure that is now really starting to launch. Excuse the pun there.
That's awesome. Well, I can definitely see why Gitika brought the two of you together for the space careers panel. And
Yeah, I'm like, Madison, are we going to be best friends now?
Yes, we
yeah,
are.
Also, you mentioned glass. I have a degree in glass blowing, so that was like a weird.
Okay,
Yeah.
now we are going to be best friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
well, maybe that's a good segue to a very broad question I want to ask, and in the context of this panel. How might we best prepare students who would have a wide variety of strengths and passions, but how might we best prepare students for careers in the growing space economy, or more aspirationally for humanity's multi-planet future? And I think you two are going to have a pretty unique or unique perspectives on this.
Yeah, I can start.
Please.
Coming from a purely art background, and I'm sure Madison can like agree with this. Like, you just kind of have to have the audacity. Like, there was no reason why I should have been doing what I was doing, and I was just like, I like it, so I'm going to keep doing it. And you have to kind of get over yourself of you're going to feel like the dumbest person in the room at times. You're going to feel like silly. You're going to feel like you don't belong there, but as long as you have like the tenacity and you're just like you have to like get over it and just be like I'm okay with not knowing. I'm okay with asking silly questions. I'm okay with not knowing 100% what's going on, because the longer you're there, then you do know what's going on. And so I don't consider myself you know a scientist or part of the space community. I'm still like an outsider. I'm still consider myself just like an artist on the outside. But like lots of people look to me and they're like, "Oh no, you know what you're talking about. Like you're telling them the mission of the Webb telescope and explaining spectroscopy to people." And like I did a piece for the Whitney Museum of American Art last year where it was all about gravitational lensing, and it was just so cool to hear you know the curator and the director of the museum describing gravitational lensing to the audience and to the people coming to the museum and seeing the piece. And I was like, oh, I just did it. I just taught a bunch of people about gravitational lensing, and they don't even understand. They don't even know that they're being taught this. That now they go home with this information. So it was really really cool. Um, but yeah, just have the audacity.
I feel the same way about doing events like this too. Like I don't think anybody could be an expert in all of everything that goes into space. And you have tens of thousands of people working on something like SpaceX Starship, right? But it's awesome to be able to, as an educator, host folks who do know what they're talking about, and to learn from that too.
I'm glad you think we know what we're talking about. Well, for me, Madison does.
I can pick up on that thought too, because I went from really just not knowing to going through the motions of sitting with so many subject matter experts in so many rooms over and over again to the point where you know. Um, Ironically, one of my first projects was in Fourier transform and infrared spectroscopy and how to infer
Of course.
data. And they just shoved all this data in front of me and said, okay, now you tell us what results you think are going to be better. And I think that they thought that I had a little bit more training than I did at the time. So I remember I was kind of looking to my mentors to say, okay, can you explain this to me very slowly? I'll get it. I'll improvise, adapt, and overcome. I'll do my research, but I just need a helping hand. And that's kind of the common theme that I see a lot of students today asking for is where's the helping hand in the front door? When you're trying to get involved in this industry because it's so big and daunting and people don't know where to start. They all want to go work for Northrop Grumman and they don't know how to get an internship. But there's so many different kind of interwoven ways that I think go into having a career in space, and a lot of it is non-traditional. There are people in policy that go into space law. There's artists like Ashley. There are so many people that come from non-traditional backgrounds. I have a background in business. Um, that enabled me to be able to be in a variety of different rooms. I got to serve for the United Nations for their COPUIS as a STEM committee advisor. I got to be part of the Lunar Chamber of Commerce, which is a Toronto-based STEM policy and small business group that helps to try to kind of like interweave industry, government, and academia. And those are kind of the 3 points of intersection that I see a lot of people trying to figure out how to navigate it. Again, it's industry, it's academia, and it's government, and they're all very different beasts, and it depends where you're trying to pursue a career in STEM and what STEM really means. I'll narrow that down to space by nature of the panel, and talk briefly about something that I do a lot of right now, which is I'm still early career, but I have found my footing. A lot of the time that I spend is in mentoring. We run internship programs at a space copy twice a year, for example, for students as young as 16, all the way up to about age 30. And there's different tiers according to your knowledge levels, your expertise, your background, whether it's in engineering or computer science or graphic design or finance, to learn how to do administrative tasks or technical tasks when it comes to being involved in, especially a small business, because I feel you can create a big impact of change. Earlier this year, I was giving a few different speeches. Similar to this in format, I gave a webinar speech for Lab of Future, which is an Emirate-based STEM education program that helps young students ages 6 to 14 learn about the fundamentals of space. So I had to break down what is regolith 3D printing on the surface of the moon to a room full of 6-year-olds who surprisingly had better questions than some of these panels that I've been on just as an industry professional. Those kids are smart. And then I also went on to do a couple of speeches in high schools. And it was really nice to see, theater kids or shop kids that were wanting to go into trade school say, hey, is there a place for me to
Mhm.
have a career in space? And I said, yes, you can be a space artist. Welding in space is a thing. Go to trade school. Yes, you can do that. So I think that at the end of the day, the message comes down to, I think this panel in particular, we come from non-traditional backgrounds and we still found our home. And the same can be said for other early career professionals, other students, regardless of your age. If that's something that you want to work towards, it is about putting yourself out there, continuously giving it your best effort, and looking for resources because they are plentiful.
Yeah, it does take some initiative, doesn't it? There's so many things in what you just said that resonate with me. One is you talked about government and industry and academia, and as with so many other things, those silos are really overlapping more and more today. And I think of a lot of the folks that I talk to about space, they've got a foot in each one, right? They might be getting government funding, but they're teaching at the university level and or they're doing research with the university and they've got a startup, it's there's oftentimes those things are really overlapping now. And earlier today, Space for Trades came up for for kids that are interested in finding that path that doesn't necessarily need to be such an academic one. So great to see that theme coming up here too. Um, Ron, I want to see if you've got any questions for Ashley and Madison before we
Oh,
move
sure.
forward. And there's at least one good one in the chat I saw go by too.
Great. Great. That'll be quick. No, Space for Trades is brilliant. It's like Virgin Galactic is hiring people that are building their spaceships that did a trade degree for 2 years after high school that just like working with carbon fiber or all kinds of things. So I think it's fabulous to see this expansion of interests and talents and careers uh, like you guys are bringing. It's like uh, when I was 9 years old when they landed on the moon the first time, and like at that time the space industry was all like military based, and now it's broadened so much. I'm not sure the thinking is catching up with that, and thinking and people realizing that there's opportunities or there will be opportunities for them, in all kinds of different careers. Like I had said earlier, it's like we're gonna have a space hotel, so we're gonna need people that are fashion specialists to figure out the best, you know, uh, threads, the best composition of what you're wearing in space, or nutritionists that figure out the best food, or people that are backgrounds in hospitality that are working on the space hotel to take care of those people. So um, it's great to see the element of art, blending into it more and more. So um,
If I could sort of turn that into a question, one of the things I wanted to ask you guys
come on.
is like um, what role might art play in preparing students for their future and for this future of humanity in space?
Hmm.
Good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I I I really love art because it allows you this room for experimentation and play that I don't think we allow many other genres to take part in. Um, you know, looking at things from a different angle can be difficult at times, especially when you're in like a regimented like track program that's going off in a certain trajectory. Um, one of the really cool things of working with scientists and engineer at NASA and ESA and SETI was something that I didn't expect was I'm getting so much inspiration from these people and from their mission and from their research. This is my muse, and I'm so excited to be a part of it. But one of the really, humbling things was that they were really excited to be working with me as well, and I didn't expect that. I was like, "I'm just gonna it's a one-way street," Like, they're doing the work, and I'm interpreting it, and I'm then making something with it and giving it to a different audience, but there's no feedback loop between the 2 of us, and that's completely not true. It was amazing to see that they really enjoyed my fresh take on their mission and their research. Um, it helps you think in a more creative way. It challenges scientists and engineers to look at something from a different angle, and I think that's really important, especially moving forward uh, in all these different missions and our journey to the stars. Is it's not going to happen the way we think it's going to happen. And I think the more artists and creative people that you have within the industry can help shake things up a little bit, um, and help that transition become a little smoother, I think, in the long run, if that makes any sense.
I love that, and I love right where you started, experimentation and play, because there's
Mhm.
not nearly enough of that in our education system right now.
I agree.
Yeah.
Definitely there is not. And I'm a prime example of that. I went down the homeschooling route because the primary education system um, in like the traditional public school didn't have a lot of resources for a lot of the subject matter that I wanted to do outside of standard curriculum. So I have a great insight and perspective on how that kind of mindset shapes students. But also I want to touch on Ron's comment about, fashion design and like the practical applications of how art and science and so many other different things. There's many things that go into the coordination of logistics that will find their way popping into long-term space duration missions. Um, I mean, space biology, agriculture, so many other different things, but specifically to fashion. I was at IAC or the International Astronautical Congress in 2024 when they were doing it in Milan, and Axiom Space unveiled the astronaut suit that they created with Prada. And it was a whole new transformation. And Axiom had been talking about different styled spacesuits and alternatives to what was being used on the ISS and all the previous like Apollo-based missions for a good long time. But it was really, really interesting to see things that could be going outside of a spacecraft for astronauts, making repairs to their system, or if we're talking about lunar landing systems, going around and walking on the moon in Prada. That's a really interesting thought to think about space-based high fashion. And there's again it's the gateway to so many other different facets of space careers. And I think the theme for this conversation is going to come back a lot to thinking about communication strategies and implementation strategies about how we make these different things happen, and then actually going out and making it a collaboration or doing a public project to get more attention out there.
I was lucky enough during the Space Prize guest speaker series to get to interview a space fashion designer, or I guess zero G fashion designers, and thinking about not just a spacesuit and fabric and the functionality, but like what could fashion be when gravity is not an issue, right? So they were designing things with wings and billowing flowy parts, and it was just awesome to see that this comes up over and over again in these sessions, but this idea that those are already jobs today, and I interviewed a space interior designer who designs luxury spacecraft. Like that's a job today. So it really is like whatever your skills and passions are, there's going to be a place for you in space now.
I'm just like, I would love to wear Prada on Earth. If I have to be in space to wear it, so be it.
Well, I think there's also an element of like space fashion for people who are here. Like our next session also is space experiences on Earth, like things that you can do to feel connected to what's happening in space or feel connected to other planets. But
I
Ron,
love
it looked like
experiencing.
you had something to add. Yeah.
That was part of my Virgin Galactic space flight, is
Oh
that
yeah.
they had to figure out what we're going to wear. So uh, they had a contract with Under Armour for a while that designed and had a big reveal on spacesuits that Richard Branson and his crew wore in 2021. And they came out of that with a different approach and gave us a black cotton suit that I have here in my closet. Well, it's not cotton, actually. They had to find the material had to be non-flammable. So we had to give measurements and have a fitting and then adjustments and then a try on for the suit we wore on the flight. So
I'm super
yeah,
curious
that
if
was
there's
an
a way
essential.
to
It was an essential element. Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm super curious if there's a way to apply radiation exposure prevention or shielding when it comes to space suit design. And that's something that we're actually
Oh,
working on at Space Copy. And
yeah.
I was sitting down having a fireside chat with Canadian astronaut Bob Thirsk a couple
Mhm.
weeks ago at an event. And he said, hey, we're talking about going to Mars. It's 1 sievert per trip. And the career limit for an astronaut is like zero point 0.5, zero point 0.6 sieverts for an entire career. And you're just talking about
Yeah.
1 sievert each way, never mind living there.
Yep.
So we were thinking, hey, what if we can weave lunar regolith with a moisture wicking material like merino wool and use that as an insulation
Yeah,
between layers when it comes to
yeah,
textiles in space.
yeah. I don't know that well, but I've read that one of the best things for radiation shielding is water, and if you could incorporate it into the structure of your spacecraft, it helps. But it's interesting. And I always thought of that as being more in, integral to the spacecraft itself rather than what you're wearing. But
Why
yeah,
not
if you
both?
can add a protective a protective degree in what you're wearing, yeah, that's a bonus.
Ron, you're reminding me too. I was Marie Lees was the interior designer, and she was talking about the every material in the interior has to be non-flammable. You know, whether it's
Yep,
a
yep,
fabric or a wood analog or something like that, it all
yep,
has to be
yep,
Hmm.
yep,
safe as well as
yeah,
stylish.
yeah.
All
Functional.
right, we have a couple of good questions in the chat at this point, so I want to go to Oren and then we'll go over to Mal. So, Oren, if you want to come on mic and ask your question.
Sure, it'll be a quick one. Both of you, I'm very impressed, I must admit. Right brain, left brain's obviously working, right? But I'm curious, when you were younger, was space, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Did you always have some interest in space and went off into, in the case of Ashley, in the arts, Madison in business, and somehow it kept drawing you to it? Or were you art or business, and then because of exposure to, by circumstance, get more into space and relevant activities? Chicken or egg, which came first, or did they come together? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really good question. For me, it was together. I I didn't know if I was going to be a scientist or an artist, and I was told that I had to choose, and I didn't like that. And I ultimately didn't choose, which is cool. Um, but yeah, again, this is why I think that the creative industries and creative arts and just art in general need to be applied more applicable and embraced within these linear trajectories. I feel like we push kids and students to climb an invisible ladder that's not actually there.
Mm.
um, and not think about the possibilities and the different ways that you can get to a place. Because yeah, I was told you have to choose. You don't get to be an artist and a scientist. You have to pick which one you want to do. And I went to art school, like a traditional art school for traditional fine arts and art history. Um, and I was the weirdo at art school that was always, my projects plugged in or referenced science or, and being
Mm.
told at art school, like, this isn't necessary, like, we don't know what you're doing. Why are you doing this? Like, we don't know, we don't understand. And to me, it made perfect sense. It's like, art and science and music and religion and all of these things are just humans trying to figure out their place in the universe. Like, why are we here? What are we doing here? And these are all just different interpretations and different ways of figuring that out. So it's all, to me, it was all the same. There was no difference.
Mhm.
Um, and so, yeah, for me, it was both. And I wish that I hadn't been discouraged in either direction or into one direction. I wish it had been, shown to me that I could have it all. Because why not have it all?
Okay.
Love it.
Yeah, integration, right? As
Integration.
opposed to those
Yeah.
ladders. Yeah,
And it's like a weird windy path, but eventually I got there
absolutely.
and I didn't have to give up either one of these things that I loved so much. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I definitely got the you have to choose speech. I think
Mhm.
everybody ends up giving that speech to people that can't quite decide where they want to kick things off in their career. And you don't have to choose. And actually, I'm really happy that you said that you don't have to choose and that you kind of found your footing by doing both at the same time. I think that I went a little bit more asymmetrical in that process. I was doing fine arts and then started to get involved in STEM and just kind of let that sit passively while going through the motions of two business degree programs, an associate's with Harvard, and then a proper bachelor's. And I'm actually just at the point of wrapping up my education in business. And even now, I kind of look at some of the core subject matter that's being taught and going back and saying, hey, I've actually been applying this for a couple of years in my business. Um, and so it was very much a conceptual idea that STEM and science could be a thing, not quite figuring out how, and then just pushing and pushing and continuing to put yourself out there because I think that's really the key. Um, and get involved in the community, attending webinars, attending conferences, and trying to figure out what's the best place to get started. Um, and kind of when I come to the end of the year, which I know we're approaching the Christmas season, I take a little bit of time to sit and reflect, and it is consistent every single year for the 8 years that I've been in this industry. Um, I would never have seen it coming. Every single year, I look at, what happened during the past 365 days, and I didn't expect any of it. Oftentimes, back in 2022 and starting Space Copy, I got to the end of 2023 after a little bit more than a year and said to myself, gosh, I didn't see that one coming. And every year it's kind of that repeat process. And I think that's one of the better things about working in this industry is you get to have a lot of uniqueness and there's no set boundary. It's as much as I appreciate and respect a 9 to 5, this is something that is bold and ambitious. And I think that choosing the career is just as much as working in the career, is that it always constantly changes and you're always trying to adjust and find new opportunities.
Thank you.
It,
Thank you.
to me, it suggests the idea that perhaps we should think about how best to prepare kids for the unexpected and to deal with it well and be open to it, right?
And to
Well,
be flexible, to
yeah.
navigate. I know when people have asked me about my career, and I've been, you know, a lot of different things, right? It's not a career path, which is usually the question. It is a meandering or a walking a pathway through various things and being open to it. Even if, as Ashley said, you feel that you're not really up to par and everybody else is. It's really teaching, I think, students and children to be open, curious, and willing to take risk because risk is also part of that, right? And be willing to fail. Thank you.
Mhm. Thanks, Warren. And Natasha, I know you're saying your question was largely answered. I don't know if there's any part of it you'd like to dig into more, but if you'd
Ah,
like to pipe up and ask anything of Madison or Ashley.
yeah, totally. Thank you, Mark. So my question was like, how do we as students navigate this art and science like realm because we have to choose and like how do you guys suggest in doing that? And I guess that was answered. So I wanted to ask of this hypothetical scenario that what if you guys had chosen like science instead of art? Do you think it would have been worked out differently or because um as you both mentioned that you work with students and like I believe it would be students of both disciplines. So do you think it makes a difference of what a student studies? Because for me, I've chosen the science realm. I'm studying astronomy, and yeah, that's I'm still unsure of what my career would look like in space, especially in the next 7 years. But yeah, so that's why I'm like exploring all the different stuff out there. I'm digging into climate, I'm digging into technology or programming and different kind of stuff which just exists and to see if I could fit in somewhere. So what would you guys say in like if you would have chosen like science or like what kind of differences do you see in students choosing science and arts?
Yeah, I can definitely speak on this. I think that if I had studied science instead of art, I'm an artist. I don't think that's a profession. I think that's a calling. Um, I don't think I would be able to not make art. I feel like if I was a scientist, I would still be making art, just probably from a different angle. Um, but I think that one of the things that I've learned from working with scientists and engineers on all these different missions, and a part of my virtual reality experience unfolding the universe was interviews with people on the web team and getting to know them and getting the message out that these are human people are making this happen, like people just like you and me are making this happen, um, pulling the humanity back into the science. And one of the things that I asked was if they had any creative outlets, and most people do. And that needs to be celebrated and brought to the surface. And I feel like, like NASA has art clubs, ESA has art clubs. I think that these are things that, when you actually bring people together and they can discuss it, you'll realize that like there are so many creative outlets, and scientists and engineers do have like these creative ways of thinking that are they're maybe not being nurtured as much as they should be. But, science and engineering is you have to be super creative to do it in the first place. Like coming up with all these crazy ideas and solutions to all these problems and like, ideas for all these missions and like conceptualizing what could possibly be out there and what we're looking for and how to find it. Very creative. Um, and I think that having a little bit more of the focus be on that element could be really helpful. But I definitely think that I would still be doing the same thing, probably from a little different perspective. But even Maggie Massetti from Goddard that I worked with on the Unfolding the Universe project, she's an astronomer and she works at NASA and she does science and she's, working in the traditional path of what you're supposed to do. But she's a very creative person, and she was actually the one that conceptualized bringing artists to come see the Webb telescope and curating these exhibitions. And I just brought her to Amsterdam last month with me because she helped me curate an exhibition in Amsterdam, and she helped me curate an exhibition in New York, and so she's actively curating now in the art world, coming from a purely scientific background. And so she was able to give me the opportunity to have a space in science, and I was able to give her an opportunity to have a space in art. And I think that's really beautiful, and that's what all of these these crossovers and collaborations are all about, is giving an entry point to somebody who wouldn't necessarily have it otherwise.
You remind me of, and Perry has said something similar in the chat of, how many astronauts have played a musical instrument on station
Exactly.
or painted on orbit,
Mhm.
or when they got back, right?
Mhm.
Several come to mind. And a lot of times you find these kind of exceptional people in whatever field, and it turns out they're also exceptional in the arts. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, one of those folks in particular reminds me of one of our advisors, Chris Hadfield,
Mhm.
always playing a guitar in space. He's the person for that. And something that I noticed really commonly, and I'll take from two instances, our internship programs, which is, a whole bunch of early career professionals, whether they're just kind of exiting their high school years, or they're knee deep in university, or they're just graduated and starting their careers. Um, and SEDS Canada, which is a student-based program. SEDS runs in multiple different countries, but myself being Canadian, I got appointed a mentor for the program that was coming out of Concordia University and Toronto Metropolitan University. And there's two very common threads, um, is that these students pour their hearts and their souls into their academics and trying to find a place in space. And then they also don't know where to start. When we're running our internship programs, we do mentorship alongside that. And I do a lot of mentorship outside of my kind of everyday work, sitting down with people and just um, talking with them and asking them, hey, what are your questions? Where are you wanting to get started? And it's a unique story every time, but I noticed that a lot of the problems end up being the same, is that they don't have accesses to resources or funding or the proper know-how or the proper mentorship to kick things off. Um, what I always like to do there is I compile a big long list of resources. A lot of it is country specific. So if you're international, here's this opportunity. If you're based in the EU, here's that. If it's the UK, if it's North America, if it's Canada or the US, and try to tailor that a little bit so that when we're talking to people, we can kind of just kick you off at least in the right direction. Um, a lot of it really just comes down to if you don't know, that's the perfect opportunity for you to try a whole bunch of different things until you do know. And there's no set date. I think that when we look back at careers 50 plus years ago, it was you go to university, you graduate, you work for a company for 40 years, and then you're done. But nowadays, many of the people that remain in my network are ebbing and flowing back and forth between this company or this career, or they worked in this sector for 10 years and they had a transition. Some of the people on our team, for example, worked in automotives and then transitioned to space, or they worked in oil and gas and energy and then they transitioned into space. So I think the message comes down to, especially as students, because this is the time in your life where you get to try new things and be experimentative, is you don't have to have it all figured out, but you do have to have the spirit to keep going out there and trying and applying for different things. And there's so many dozens of opportunities in the space industry. And being a mentor and also being an early career person, I've seen that firsthand. And I always say, if you're looking for resources, you can come ask the team at Space Copy. We always have one or two things that might be helpful to know.
Awesome. Yeah, it's certainly not a straight or even predictable trajectory. For most people I've had the opportunity to talk with in the space industry, even if they're in a traditional role like astronaut or engineer or scientist, like that the trajectory that got them here tends to be pretty unpredictable as well. Ron, I saw you unmuted though.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, just thinking about all this, it's like, seems like the educational system is very geared towards steering people down an already established path, and that trying to blend one one thing and other things is not conventional. And seems like it's getting better. I mean, Ken Robinson's TED video on how schools kill creativity in students was like one of their most watched videos. And so I think there's great awareness of that. And yeah, Madison, I'm wondering if as an early career, if maybe you saw opportunities to build a career that's blended between different disciplines, um, that probably wasn't there. And like when I was in my 20s in the 1970s or 80s. So, and uh, what's a shaman? It's like, I wonder if you've seen this in some of your studies. If you come from Pakistan, and like, did you get the feeling in your education that you had different pathways, or even had the opportunity to blend, you know, different disciplines into a single thing? It's almost like it's up to the student to be creative and figure it out.
It is. Absolutely, it is.
Yeah.
And I'll keep this one succinct, and I'll just say as a requisite, I saw some of the comments saying, "Hey, did you have resources and websites?" Yes, I have resources and websites. So I'll drop my contact info when we're done this talk, and I highly encourage people to reach out if they want to kind of find their footing a little bit more, or they want to explore a little bit more. Um, but yes, it's 100% up to the student, and I think that comes down to something that we were taught in the early days of business school is emotional intelligence, so EQ being just as important as IQ, and having the initiative and the core competencies to go out there and try and build it for yourself, because it's not traditional. And hey, this entire panel has all been about non-traditionalism working its way into STEM and space-based careers. Um, it is a huge effort of the student to be the person that goes out there and pursues what they want. Secondary to that, it is a huge responsibility of the family of that student to support, or for the teachers or for the education system to not necessarily plug and play and pick opportunities for that student, but to provide them with a little bit of creative freedom and support to say, okay, if this is what you want to explore, if you want, we can help you try and find some options. We might not quite know what we're talking about, but at the end of the day, we're here to back you and support you. And if you want to continue this as a hobby, or if you want to continue this in a professional capacity, or both, then have that door be open. Because I see a lot of rigidness coming from traditional institutions and systems that stifles a lot of creativity. And it really, really helps build itself up when you have that supportive community.
Oh boy, community.
I also
Thanks.
think,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
please.
Well, I also want to like kind of talk about what Ron said about, these traditional career paths and, you used to like, and even, I don't know, it was mentioned before that, you go to school and then you get a job and you work at a company for like 40 years or like, these traditional career paths. And I think right now, we might be benefiting from like a little bit of uncertainty, with the way technology is going, especially AI. And I think like lots of jobs are not set in stone anymore. And I think new generations are realizing that, this doesn't work anymore. This certainty, this career ladder, this path doesn't work anymore. And so, I'm a millennial. The gig economy was big when I was getting out of school, like have a ton of jobs, do a bunch of different things. And I think, part of that sucks, but part of that's great because like necessity is the mother of invention. Like the reason we can have these blended careers now is because there's so much uncertainty in what we were told to be true and what we were told to go strive for, and that's just not there anymore. And so now you have to come up with these crazy new things, good and bad, on both sides. But I mean, like, I don't know, like all of this for me came out of I don't know what I'm doing, and there's no certainty, and there's no you kind of shoot your shot because like what else are you gonna do? So
Yeah, it's funny reflecting on this panel as I'm listening to you two and everybody here speak on this topic. I mean, space educator was not a career I could have prepared for. I mean, education technology was barely a career you could have prepared for. But Ron, we were talking earlier today too about how things are changing in this field, and I've got Google alerts set, and it's frequently I see jobs posted, whether it's at Kennedy Space Center or museums across the country, or a lot of the different organizations there in Colorado Springs, for instance, that there are space education jobs. Like this went from sort of in a very short period of time being a very niche thing to something where like there are actual careers here. And then that being said, like I've still got to rely on a local business if I want to make ends meet, and spent a lot of time in local chambers of commerce lately. And so suddenly, Madison, the Lunar Chamber of Commerce, sounds very interesting to me.
It is. It's really nice to see all these different spaces actually creating forums for people to come together. And it's one of probably a dozen examples of places that I've been involved in. And I'm sure everybody here has a really unique story too, and some of the places that got them to this present moment.
Well, I'm gonna have to figure out how to be involved as well. And I will, speaking of space career and space education resources, I do have a spreadsheet I can share with everybody, which I'll do here at the end of the session. But we have reached the end of our appointed time. So I will end the recording here in just a moment and put up the slide for the next session. But for anybody that is sticking with us, it's a special one. This is the space experiences on Earth. Emily Apollonio is here with us to talk about analog astronaut experiences. Loretta Whitesides is going to be here to talk about spacekind. But for right now, let's thank Ashley and Madison for joining us today. Just fantastic to hear your stories and to hear your responses in response to everyone's questions. So thank you also to everyone that asked questions, and to Ron for co-hosting with me and hosting us on Zoom. Thank you everyone for a wonderful session.